Hello, my name is Emma Kim, and I am a senior at Marys Ridge High School. Now, Ambassador Turner, may you please introduce yourself for our audience?
Hello, everyone. My name is Turner, and I'm the U.S. Special Envoy on North Korean human rights issues.
Now, Ambassador Turner, how did you start focusing on human rights in general, regardless of the boundaries of different countries?
So my interest and activity in the human rights space actually began when I was a college student, and it was largely driven by my faith. I grew up in a Christian family and felt a very strong commitment to service. And so from there, I think I developed a love for helping people. When I was looking into careers and opportunities to serve in the government, one of the areas that I found particularly fascinating was the human rights and international religious freedom space.
It has been 20 years since the U.S. recognized human rights issues in the DPRK. What has been accomplished, and what are the remaining short-term and long-term goals in your opinion?
One, I think one of the amazing things that I've seen over the course of the last 20 years since the North Korean Human Rights Act has passed has been a real activism, sense of community within the North Korean human rights civil society community. There are now more than 200 North Korean refugees living in the United States, many other North Korean escapees who have immigrated to the United States are here. They have built up a great community, and the Korean American community itself has welcomed those individuals and helped pass on some of the lessons from the Korean American community's own immigration experience to help these new wave of Korean immigrants to the United States to feel more settled. But in addition to that, there's just broader awareness, especially amongst young people, and I've been talking about this a lot recently, that it's exciting for me to be going to North Korea human rights events these days and to be seeing more and more students like yourself, university students, high school students, who are thinking and talking about North Korean human rights. I'm ready, as somebody who has been working in this field for 20 years, to be able to pass the baton to the next generation of activists who can carry it forward, and hopefully someday we can all see a free and open North Korea.
The UN report of the Commission of Inquiry on Human Rights in the DPRK was released 10 years ago. What steps did the UN take, if any, to address the issue? Is there another report due? And has there been any opinions with opposing views?
So the 2014 UN Commission of Inquiry report was a groundbreaking report when it was first issued. It was one of the first of its kind that the UN had produced anywhere in the world. And so when the Commission released the final report, this nearly 400-page document that meticulously covered in great detail witness testimony, analyzed government policies, looked at satellite imagery, and compiled it all in one place. It was just a really important step forward. I think one of the most powerful things that the Commission said when they released the report was that in 2014, up until that point, the international community's response to the crisis, the human rights crisis in North Korea, had been insufficient. And that really galvanized a lot of energy from the international community. Governments who had not previously spent much time engaging on North Korea and North Korean human rights started to think about their own policies. In fact, we saw a few governments actually turn off diplomatic relations that they had with the North Korean government as a result of that report. We also saw an interesting reaction by the North Koreans in that they started what a lot of people called a charm offensive at that time. They started to engage more at the UN. They were very eager to defend their reputation in the international space. And so it was also interesting to see how much that report prompted a reaction. It shows that they're listening to what the international community is saying on human rights. Now here we are 10 years later after that report, and there is, as you mentioned, another report due this past year at the March session of the UN Human Rights Council. Member states called upon the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights to issue a new report that will be released in September of 2025 that looks at the 10 years since the Commission of Inquiry report. And so I think we are all hoping to feed into that report and to make sure that that report is the most comprehensive report that it can possibly be, and making sure that victims, survivors, escapees, refugees, that they're able to have their voices heard through this particular report. Truth-telling, memorialization, accountability are all important parts of this process, and we want to be as supportive of that effort as possible. You know, in the past few years since COVID, we've seen a real decline in the human rights situation in North Korea. This 10-year anniversary year of the Commission of Inquiry report has been really important at re-injecting some energy into the conversation because there are so many global human rights crises happening right now. And given how protracted the North Korea crisis has been, it's been really easy for governments to get complacent, for the international community to kind of push the North Korea human rights issue aside. But civil society organizations, young activists and leaders have really done a great job of saying, no, we can't forget about this, right? There are people that are suffering here, there are people who don't have a voice, and so we need to make sure we're doing what we can to be that voice for them in garnering more support, building pressure from the international community to push for concrete change for North Koreans.
Whether it's from the DPRK or any other country, what difficulties do refugees face when they're settling when they end up?
I think refugees in general, right, there are similarities across populations. They're far away from home in many instances. They often are starting from scratch because they fled with a sense of urgency, and so may not have anything with them, or may just have a small bag of belongings that they were able to collect as they were either fleeing conflict or fleeing abuses or seizing a moment, right? For some people it is only a small window of opportunity that they have to make that break and to find freedom. And so I think many are starting a new life in a new country or a new location, maybe not knowing the language, maybe not having a community who shares a common heritage or a common culture, and then just real basic things like, I need a job, I need a way to put food on the table, I have children who need clothes, who need shelter. It's important that and this is something that America has for many years been very successful at through our U.S. Refugee Admissions Program, is to make sure that we are providing that network of support when these individuals arrive. Few of the things that are specific to the North Korean human rights community, or the North Korean escapee community, or refugee community that we've noticed is, one, the language difference, and trying to make sure that, especially for the ones that come to the United States, that we make English language training as accessible to them as possible. But two, also making sure that they're given the opportunity to pursue the hopes and dreams that they left North Korea to find. And so that means also putting aside some of the stereotypes that we may have of a North Korean, what they're capable of, what their education might be, what their understanding of the world may be, and to really say, well, what do you want to do? Not what do I think you should do, or what do I think would be a good job for you, but oh, you want to be a nurse? Well, let's talk about what skills you need to be able to pursue that dream, and let's find a way to help facilitate that. And so I hope for all of us as the kind of people who are on the front lines of receiving North Korean refugees when they arrive in the United States, that we can do that, take our preconceived notions of what a North Korean is and put it aside, and to really meet the person where they're at, and to hear what they've been seeking and why they came here and what we can do to best help them.
Some studies indicate that Asian women are the most vulnerable group of women in the work field across the board. Do you agree? And how did you navigate through the obstacles?
I think that there are very specific challenges for women of Asian heritage to navigate in the workplace. I always hate, or I'm hesitant to rank people's experiences because we do all come from very different, diverse backgrounds. And so I have absolutely felt, though, in my own career and my own experiences, the intersectionality between gender and heritage. And so I think when I've been faced with those challenges myself, I found that it's really important, one, to think about where the other person is coming from, and not always to approach it from the position of it's a hostile attack, but to think about it from the perspective of maybe this person doesn't understand that what they're saying is rooted in some sort of bias or stereotype. But then also to be firm and clear about who I am and why maybe that situation didn't apply. I've also always just been a believer in if you do the hard work, right, and prove like I deserve this seat at the table. But also a firm believer in it is also important for women who are at my phase in my career and my life to also think about how I can make the workplace and the work environment better for the next generation who's coming in. I oftentimes think about my own daughters and what their experience is going to be like when they enter into the workforce. And so thinking about things that I can do to help that next generation to maybe have a little bit of a different experience than I have.
Please give your remarks on the global security and the importance of protecting human rights.
I think, and this is something that we talk about a lot in the North Korea context, and we've been saying it, the US government has been saying this a lot at the United Nations recently, is that the human rights situation in North Korea is inextricably linked to international peace and security. And the reason that we talk about it in this way is because North Korea is such a repressive environment that there is the checks and balances, for instance, that exist in the US system don't exist in North Korea. And so the things that would constrain our government from doing something crazy don't exist there. And so if Kim Jong-un wakes up one day and he's had a bad day, he could take an action, and there's no one in that system who will feel safe enough or free enough to be able to say, that's a bad idea, sir, right? And so those fundamental freedoms are things that we as Americans often take for granted, like the ability to have a conversation like the one that we're having right now, or the ability to post a picture on Instagram or whatever, are things that do create or push a government to be responsive to the people. They are also the things that help hold a government accountable to the people. The work that we're doing to create that space for everyday citizens to both know what their government is doing and then also to speak to their government about their needs and what they need is really important in creating those checks and balances. Beyond that, though, beyond just what's going on inside North Korea, the North Korean government is also committing all sorts of abuses outside of North Korea, which is also a threat to our peace and security. They regularly cross over borders to sometimes kidnap their own citizens, but as we know with Japan, with South Korea, they have abducted foreign nationals and taken them back into North Korea, and have held many of those individuals for decades, right? And this would be the case of the Japanese abductees, or the cases of the thousands of South Koreans who have been abducted dating back to the Korean War. In addition to that, North Korea sends out workers who work in forced labor conditions. Those workers are generating revenue that end up funding the regime's illicit weapons program. So a lot of us don't think about this, but the seafood that you could be eating at dinner tonight, may have been fished by North Korean workers and then who are in slave labor conditions. They may have been processed in a factory with North Korean workers who are not free to leave their workplace, who are not being compensated for their work. And then it's ending up on your table at dinner. And I know I don't want to be complicit in either forced labor or in funding a regime's weapons program. And so those kind of things are other elements that a lot of us don't think of on a day-to-day basis, where North Korea's actions are directly impacting your daily life. And so really challenge people to think about where your fish is coming from, but also other products, right? There was a report earlier this year about fake eyelashes being made by North Korean workers. They're one of North Korea's biggest exports. A lot of other places where some of those actions may be intersecting with your daily life that we're not always thinking about.
All right, now, is there any last comments or statements you'd like to make before we conclude our interview?
I think the one thing I will end on is to really challenge us all to, one, think about ways that we can support the North Korean escapee community, especially within the Korean American community, because there are so many challenges that these individuals face when they arrive in the United States. The language barrier, finding jobs, finding ways to integrate into the school system, and just getting on their feet. And so this is a place where the Korean American community can really be a great support. But also to think, like I said just a few minutes ago with the forced labor situation, is where are these products coming from that are coming onto my dinner table, or that my K-beauty products that I'm putting on my face? Thinking about the different ways in which those actions are intersecting with our lives. And also thinking about having a conversation with an intergenerational conversation. And this is something that has really probably left the biggest imprint on me during my time in this position, is meeting with the Korean American divided family community. And I really hope that you and other young people that hear this message will think about talking to that older generation who have stories to tell, and to think also about helping to realize that dream for them of reconnecting with their hometowns or their family members who they've been separated from for so long. And so making sure that we don't forget those stories, and to make sure that we're helping to amplify their voices as well, and sharing this story beyond the Korean American community to a broader American audience as well.